our first season of the podcast now. We always ask people who we think we should talk to next, and Tonda said you. She nominated you for us to talk to.
Yeah, I was honored and nervous, I told you. I'm really flattered and also very anxious. Well, it helps to listen to your own friend. You know, I listen to Tonda's, so that does help. So
yeah.
Tonda can do it, I can do it.
Hi, I'm Missy.
And I'm Elizabeth, and welcome to You Should Meet My Friend. Today, we are talking to Vero. I actually met her, I believe, where parents were required to come in and help build sets when our kids were in a play together. I just remember this very tall, very beautifully dressed woman who, I was kind of new to the scene and she seemed to know what she was doing. And so that was the start of what's been a very long friendship. Vero is a playwright. She writes social satire, comedies, and mysteries that explore issues of class, loyalty, and the insecurities that drive our most ill-advised actions. Her plays have been produced in numerous festivals in the US and the UK. And what Tonda talked about on the podcast was when 6 of your short plays were produced at a local furniture consignment store, kind of a theater in the round experiment, which was just really, really fabulous. She's also the founding member of the much discussed writing group that I am part of, and which has been meeting since 2016. I believe. Certainly working together in the writing group, I've gotten to know you a lot better. I read in your official bio that you grew up on 3 continents. What do you mean when you said you grew up on 3 continents? So that's one of the...
What continent are you missing?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to learn more about the 3 continents you grew up on.
So I was born in Belgium. And I lived there until I was 9. And then my family moved to New York for 2 years. And then we moved to Ethiopia, the 3rd continent of Africa, 2 years later. So when I was 11, and we lived there for 3 years. And then we moved back to New York to the same house, same school, but not really same house, same school, because now it was high school. So it was a whole new,
Sure.
Socially, it was new, even though I knew a lot of the people. But yeah, so those are the 3 continents.
Great. What part of Belgium?
Outside of Brussels, like a really small town that my parents commuted into Brussels from.
Okay. Missy and her husband had an assignment in
Devers. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So Mons.
Yeah.
I'm
familiar with Mons. We have friends there.
We loved it. We absolutely loved it. Best beer, best chocolate in the world. And made really good friends. We still have neighbors that we were friends with that really stepped in and were really gracious to us. They were not used to Americans being so friendly and interested, because everybody else who had lived in our house was always very standoffish to them. And, we're like, hey, and our one neighbor, her and her husband spoke like very little English, but always were inviting us over to their home. And it was just a special little neighborhood we had. Yeah, it was a great time. Loved it.
It's nice when you meet, actual people from the actual country.
Absolutely.
Do you think that living in 3 different distinct places as you were growing up, is that where your love and interest in travel came from?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think, I think I decided I learned a lot from moving around like that as a kid, but I did not want that for my own kids, because I also felt like, our relatives in Belgium, it was just our nuclear family who moved here and then to Africa. And so we do see them, but not often. We're not as close definitely as we were when we lived there, obviously. Yeah, and then just friendships are difficult, true meaningful friendships when you're moving all the time as a kid, because as an adult, you may make an effort to maintain them, but as a child, you're just kind of following wherever. So I thought I want my kids to experience the world, to travel, to have, everything that travel brings to open their minds to other cultures but I also want them to have a pretty deep rooted base, which of course they're sometimes not happy about that either, but whatever. But for me, I thought, if I had to choose, that's what I would have wanted to do is to like be somewhere but travel a lot. So that's what we tried to do as much as we could when they were really little. We just traveled any chance we had. Yeah, and I think that definitely, I mean, I wanted them to experience all those places, and although we have not gone to Africa, sadly, yet with them, I don't know. I think there's also the fact that when we lived in Ethiopia, it was during the Civil War. That is not something that I would want my children to experience either necessarily. We were pretty safe, honestly. And, you also realize, I think, you realize that your world is still middle school when you're in middle school. It doesn't really matter that I mean, and I'm not even joking, outside the walls of the schools, you still have your social stuff, and your school stuff and all of the school dance and all of that is still happening. So that's a funny thing to think about that, people ask me about what was it like during the Civil War? I'm like, I can tell you what I wore to the dance. I can tell you, who I had a crush on. And yes,
Right.
there was a curfew, and yes, there were soldiers everywhere. And no, we could not travel far beyond the capital city and et cetera, et cetera. But that was my world. Anyway, I'm totally digressing. But yes, it did make me want to travel. It did not make me want to bring my family to settle somewhere, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's understandable.
What
Yeah.
kind of work did your parents do that you were living in New York and Ethiopia?
My dad was a translator
Oh, okay.
at the UN, and my mom was a school teacher, and she actually did teach at the international school in Addis Ababa as well. But we worked for his
Fascinating.
work, so yeah.
And I guess I don't know this. You have siblings? I know we've talked about it. I'm spacing on.
Yeah, I'm the oldest. I have a brother and a sister.
Ah, okay. Gotcha.
And after my long root speech, nobody lives near each other.
But you know how to get there.
Yes, but we do, it's easy to get together, exactly. So yeah.
Did
Yeah.
your because I was doing some Googling, and did your writing start with travel writing, or have you always been a writer of plays?
No, I guess I mean, I always did a lot of writing for my work. I worked in public health communication
Mm-hmm.
before kids, basically. And so I did a lot of writing for that. But it was all, well, some of it was a little bit creative because they were communication campaigns, but mostly not creative. And then yes, and then I started travel writing, and then I started playwriting, but I hadn't done any playwriting until uh, probably about 2016, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Really? Because you always seem like such a pro. So I'm
Oh, thank you.
I'm stunned that we were reading your, I guess maybe I didn't pay attention to the details. I didn't realize that was your first ever play you wrote.
I mean, or second or third. I
Mhm.
don't know, but I started with writing short plays, and that's what I was sharing at first with the group. My first full-length play I wrote during COVID, actually. So, yeah, I mean, I was very productive during COVID, I will say, because I could, you can't go anywhere.
Sure.
Everybody's here, but busy on their computers. So, yeah, for me, it was very productive, I will say.
Did you write something first and then get connected with classes and playwriting intensives, or like what order did that go in?
No, so I had an idea, a really dumb idea. Like now I'm like, how did I think that was going to be interesting? But I had this idea of like the story that I wanted to tell, that I needed to tell.
Mm-hmm.
and that I wanted to write a play about. And for years I thought about this, truly. And then I decided, this is silly. I should just take a class in playwriting and try to write this play. And so I did that at the theater lab in DC. Great teacher, terrible play. And like she couldn't even, I mean, she was trying to be nice, but it was bad. Really, really bad. But I love doing it. And, I was like, that's okay. It never has to go anywhere. It's a play. Like, if I don't show this to anybody else other than this class, then this never happened. You know what I mean? But I kept learning and, hopefully improving because that was just, it wasn't a story idea. It was like a notion and
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't work. So,
What was your first play that had a reading or went to or you submitted to a festival, or I guess how'd you make the next leap of faith to then take something you've written and submit it, to a festival or for a reading?
I think the first one was actually kind of a friendly, it was at the Little Theater of Alexandria. They were doing a night of comedic readings,
Mm-hmm.
10-minute, comedies. And so I thought, well, this is easy enough. And probably they will take it because they're not going to get a million. And they didn't get a million submissions. And so I think they picked two of my plays actually to do, two short plays. So that did give me the confidence to be like, okay, well, that was relatively painless. And I went to see it, because it's in town.
Mm-hmm.
And they were pretty well received. So that's what gave me the confidence. So I think just kind of familiar, I didn't know the actors, but I know the theater and some of the people who run it and stuff. So it just felt not scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was it like to be in the audience and the beats in the play that should get a laugh and waiting to see if it went over or not?
It's wild because there's so much that goes into it. The biggest question is, does the director understand the lines and the plays and the beats and the characters? And if they do, you know, then I think it works, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because they can make it work. Even if it's not that funny, they can make it funnier or just land better. So yeah, I think trusting the director, hoping that there's a good director and actors, of course, but someone to correct the course if it's just not working, and hoping that they have enough rehearsal time is the other thing.
Sure.
And sometimes being in a rehearsal could be helpful, but I usually am not. So,
I guess I'm not familiar. How much leeway can a director take with the words you've written? Like, are they obligated to do it as is, or do they kind of tweak it?
they have zero leeway with the words, nothing.
Ah, gotcha.
But they have every leeway with, is this person crying when they're saying it? Is this person screaming? Are they whatever they're doing, how they're saying those lines is completely up to the director and the actor, really. So, but they can't change anything. And the stage directions, and that's why we've all seen it's Shakespeare, but it's set in space or it's whatever. Like that stuff you have a lot of leeway with.
Yeah.
But the words, you don't. But yeah, the stage directions, are they actually in a restaurant or are they in space? Well, that is up to the director, actually, which is kind of fun for them, but I guess it can be frustrating.
How do you handle criticism or someone maybe critiquing your work? Or I was thinking about that when Elizabeth mentioned if they laugh at the right time. Like, I think I'm a really funny person, but sometimes you don't quite get the reaction you think you're going to get. How do you handle that?
I mean, I don't know, I think theater is so, I don't know what the word is, or it's passing. It's a passing thing, and it is
Yeah.
whatever you saw as a one-time thing, right? So you
Yeah.
saw a time and a place where people didn't react,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean it can't be produced again, or even that the next
Right.
night won't be a lot better.
Yeah.
I think that's what kind of keeps it. And plus, I'm not famous. I don't have reviews of anything. It's like, so it's people tend to be polite if you're not famous. They're like, it's amazing that you're doing anything, right? So
Yeah. I went to high school production yesterday, and it was a musical that I've never heard. And I was just like, I was lost most of the time. In the end, it all wrapped up, and I didn't recognize any of the music, and it was just kind of like, I don't know, bewildered most of the time. And I there was a moment in there, and I was like, I think I could write a better. I say that, right?
yeah.
As I could write a better play than this or a better musical, but we all know, honestly, no, it's not easy. It's very hard.
No, writing a musical, I think must be very, very hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
Do you ever think about writing in that genre?
I do.
Oh, yeah?
I do. Yeah. No, I have an idea for a musical, but it's probably not going to go anywhere. I started it actually, not with, I didn't start the music, just the
Yeah.
script. So yes, I do have ideas for, of course I do. I have ideas for everything, but I did start writing it a little bit.
Oh, wow. And
Yeah,
when you do because I think for musicals, right, you have someone who writes the dialogue and someone who writes the music that goes with it. Is it
right.
really a separate person?
It can be, I think what I was working on is more, I think it would be more of like a play with music actually than a musical because the action won't be in the songs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
the story wouldn't really be in the songs. There would be musical numbers in a play. So when you're telling the story in the music, I mean, I don't know how they do that, honestly.
How do you even start that process? Like, okay, you have an idea, and then how do you, I don't even know, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
So this is gonna sound like I'm being rude, but I do actually start at the beginning. I start at the beginning. I work
Yeah.
very linearly. I mean,
Okay.
I have to be like, what's the beginning of this play and what happens at the end? For real.
Yeah. That makes
That
sense.
is the only way for me, I have to know what's happening at the end, otherwise I could be writing a play forever.
Good point.
Do you know your end as you're writing it?
Yeah, so I think, and I have playwriting teacher who's in New York who was the other second bright, silver lining of COVID is that I signed up for this class in New York City, which I never could have done before, since everything went online. And I've been in the same class with the same people. So what is it, 4 years?
Yeah.
That's
Almost four
amazing.
years. And once a week, 3 hours a week. Yeah,
Wow.
it really is amazing. So, in fact, I think a lot of them are coming to see my son's play in New York City. That's in a couple of weeks. So, I mean, it's really cool. But the very first full-length play I wrote was with that group, and I think this was the luckiest break. And Elizabeth, I think you will know exactly what I'm talking about. But the very first play I ever wrote was a murder mystery. So with a murder mystery, I mean, you cannot be going off on like, let's see what happens, because then, it's not a story. If there's like who gets killed and who did it, right? And why and how. Those are the questions before you start the play. You have to have answered most of those, right? So I think that's now, having done that first, I approach every play like that. I mean, not who gets killed, but
Yeah.
a little, and there, it's not like this scene is gonna be, I'm gonna have these two talk about this, and then it's and they're gonna reveal that. It's not, once you start writing, it's freeing, I think, to know where you're going. So if you think of a play like it's a mystery, and it is in a way, right? Because you want the audience to wonder what's gonna happen next. I mean, you want them to have surprises
Mm-hmm.
at certain points in your play, otherwise it's really boring. Yeah, so that's what's really helped me plan things out, I think, at least in my head, of like I really can't start writing until I know these major things. And it doesn't mean I can't bring in new characters and new scenes, and then they go to the diner and do something totally different, but it will still stay on course because I've got to hit those, those questions that I had to answer at the beginning.
So you're not a pantser.
Nope.
See, do you know what a pantser is? It's
No.
someone that writes without a plan.
Does that actually work?
You're either a planner or a seat of your pants writer. And so the time
Gotcha.
where you just like launch yourself into the story with no idea where you're going.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And some people, some very famous writers write like that. I mean, that is definitely, it's not that it can't work. It's just, I don't think it would work for me. It doesn't work for me, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
What would be your dream scenario as a playwright? Like something on Broadway someday, or something that's made into a movie, or what, like if everything went right, the right people saw your work, where would you like to be?
I think it would be all of that. Yeah, I mean, it would be everything. I'd love to be on the West End, that's really a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Or obviously New York too. Yeah, and then sure, and a Netflix series would be fantastic.
Then we could say, we know her. And I think this podcast then would just take off.
Right.
So.
Right. Right. I should totally do a Netflix series. And then, yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. So is there, sorry, this is just a total rabbit hole. Is there a difference in the kind of stuff that's on the West End in London as opposed to New York City and Broadway? Like in my brain, they're interchangeable, but what's your opinion?
Well, I have opinions because I like to go, I go to London quite a bit because of various things. And I actually had a reading of one of my plays in London.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a reading. It was not a full production. So, anyway, but it was thrilling. It was awesome. And I think this is super generalization. It's not a generalization. I think this is a fact. A lot of plays I've seen in London were written by American playwrights, especially new plays. I mean, plays that are so American.
Mm-hmm.
Straight Line Crazy is an example. I saw that last year. About the man who kind of designed New York City. I mean, it's a completely American play about an American architect, right? There was this play there at that time too, that was about Trump. Like it was some Trump thing that was also written by an American. But I could give you so many examples. The musicals, mostly written by Americans, but the plays in particular are just, I mean, it's really astounding if you go to the West, or to just look at what's playing there right now, you'll just see a lot of American and British playwrights too, but we don't get a lot of British playwrights in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get so many American playwrights over there writing American plays, Anyway, I could give you so many examples because a lot of the plays I see there are American and the actors are British, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know a lot of our actors in Hollywood and Netflix, streaming services are Scottish, British, and Irish. So I can't remember what your question was, but what I'm seeing is
the difference between West End
huge amount of
Broadway.
British actors and Irish actors and American playwrights. So that's where my head goes. I'm like, I'd like to be on the West End because I love the acting there, and
sure,
they seem to respond to American writers.
Do you think they're more willing to take financial risks on new stuff in the West End as opposed to Broadway? That's a question on my part.
No, I don't think so, but they do get more government support,
Gotcha.
Especially actors. I mean, acting is really much more, I think, of a profession that is a little more sustainable in England because they have a lot of support, i.e. health insurance, right?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so but it's more than health insurance. They were recognized, during COVID, they got money. I mean, actors were getting money. Here it was very difficult for artists to get money during COVID, right? From the government. So I think maybe they are more supported structurally or socially. Yeah, I do. But I think in terms of taking chances on new
Stuff.
and playwrights, I don't think so. I think New York's amazing for that. But it's just it's more of a struggle there, probably.
That was actually the sum total of my let's talk about Vero questions.
Okay. But you didn't give me a chance to say that I'm not good at gardening.
You're not well, we're getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting to that.
Fine. Well, now I blew it.
I guess I should have said that usually the person that has a connection does the questions we don't share with you questions, and then the person that is new to the friendship gets to ask the everyday
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right.
So
are you ready for me to ask those?
I'm ready for your question. Go ahead.
I think we're ready.
Sorry. I had a coughing fit, so I excused myself. And I don't know where that came from. Let me get to those questions, because I'm going to do them in the order in which Elizabeth wrote them in the email, because there's a lot of controversy surrounding the order of these questions.
Miss did them in a different order once, and it just sort of like blew my brain out.
Yeah, she was just like, I can't handle it.
So now she likes to tease me about the fact that very particular, but
right.
It honestly doesn't matter. I was more laughing at myself because I'm like, what matter? It really doesn't matter.
I know it doesn't. Anyways, so this one's going to be, I think, very easy for you. What's the most interesting place you have traveled, or what is your dream location you'd like to visit?
I think probably Ethiopia. I mean, but I live there.
Right.
And I also traveled to Romania with a friend whose father worked for the Canadian embassy, and it was right after, well, the overthrowing Ceausescu, but it was in 1990, I want to say. There had been a miners' revolt. I mean, it was a whole thing, but for some reason we went there on vacation. And and I was 19, or I don't know, obviously. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And both communist regimes, and I mean, fallen in Romania's case, but Ethiopia was a Marxist regime while I was there. So that was very interesting to me. And then my dream destination is Japan, and I have not.
Oh yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Very cool.
absolutely.
That was my first real job in the Air Force, was in Japan.
Which
is now 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't really been back. I really want to go back to Japan.
Yeah. We should take this on the road. Maybe we could do that.
Totally.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm also a big Studio Ghibli nerd. You guys know those animated movies, Studio Ghibli, Miyazaki? No.
No.
It's a whole nerd, subculture. Anyway, he is incredible, the director there. And they have a museum, but they have a new theme park, which may be more for children, but I mean, they're very innocent story. It's lovely. A lot of his films are just very lovely. And a lot of them, most of them have a female lead little girl character, and you should look them up. They're fantastic. So that's one of the reasons, but also the food and the architecture and the how this is completely my vision of politeness and being on time and all of that. I'm very drawn to it.
Yeah. I am fascinated. I would love to go to Japan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Question number 2. So, Vero, I don't know if you know this about me, but I work in a funeral home. I love what I do.
No, I did not.
Yeah, I really do love it. And so this is my question. What do you want to be known for? When future generations look at your family history, or whether it's your obituary or what your kids tell their kids about, what is it that you want to be known for?
I mean, I think I do mostly probably want to be known for, raising good people. I think that's probably my top if I had a legacy, because they literally are the legacy, so they better be good. They better be good when I'm gone.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I think the other thing that is beautiful about plays is that, they can be produced forever. I mean, that would be an incredible legacy to have that go on after I'm gone.
Right. Yeah.
A body of work that people can continue to enjoy and produce over time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You said your son is going to be in a play?
They are an actor and musician in New York City.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been there, let's see, since a few months after college, after graduating from college. So it's been like a year and a half now. And this is their maybe fourth play. It's off
Wow.
Broadway, and
Yeah.
but it's a big venue. So because irks me, to be off Broadway, you have to have 100 seats. This theater has 96. So I keep saying, if four of us stand in the back, can we be off
Right.
Broadway? I mean,
Absolutely.
I didn't realize that was the number of seats was a requirement to
Me
be.
neither. I was like, what is off Broadway? Like, what is that? It has nothing to do with really how far you are from Broadway. I did know that, because even Broadway, right? You're not on Broadway necessarily, but it's the number of seats. So I don't know what the seats are for actual Broadway,
Mhm.
but I know that to be off Broadway, you have to have 100 seats. And
Interesting.
they have 96. Did I say that already?
Yeah. Yeah. So you have Broadway, and then so we'll call it varsity. Junior varsity is off
Yeah.
Broadway, but you have
Yeah.
at least 100 seats. And
Yeah.
then off Broadway is the small
Club.
and
Club
clubs.
sport, no.
Club sport.
No, it's the smaller venues. Yeah, it's this definitely
Yeah.
the smaller venues.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
That's pretty awesome.
Mhm.
Here's your question that you asked for, and we'll be surprised when you tell us. What is one thing you are not good at?
I am not good at gardening.
Same. I understand that.
I'm not good at it. I don't like it. It should just be called weeding, because that is all it is. And then at the end of the day, you don't have weeds, but your back hurts and your knees hurt and you're sunburned and the
Mhm.
mosquitoes, and I just hate it. I hate it.
Now, I'm not good at gardening, but I still do it. And I don't know why, because I'm pretty sure all the money I spend versus what I yield
Mhm.
is disproportionate.
I heard a Midwestern comedian talk about the fact that if you added up how much money you spent growing that one tomato, it's like a
Oh.
$812 tomato.
Yeah. Well, if that tomato like made it to, I guess it's not fruition, but actually was edible, but mine aren't even edible. So no.
It is definitely my middle son. He comes home for the summers and he loves having a garden. Starts working on it over spring break and he loves having it. And so I join in with him. And my grandmother was a master gardener, but she didn't give me that trait.
Mhm.
But and I blame the soil, totally the soil here. But
Oh, totally. Yeah.
yeah, he starts it, but his interests kind of wane, through the summer. And pretty soon it's my garden. I guess maybe it makes me, I have a fond remembrance of gardening with my grandmother. And I
I
guess
have
maybe
the
that's part of it.
same thing, which is why
Yeah.
I want to like it. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being by her side and picking,
Right.
and she grew everything, and she had a
Yeah.
greenhouse. She had an apple orchard. She had everything, apricot. I mean, you name it. She grew
Yeah.
literally everything, and it was great. But
Yeah.
it's not fun for me now. So
Yeah. We have apple, pear, plum, apricot, and then we planted some cherry trees. And I think I'm going to get a persimmon tree and a peach tree. And, we're just dabbling in it, but every fall we take the apples because they're not always a pretty apple, at least the ones that were here when we moved here. And so we press them and make hard cider and
Oh, nice.
apple cider. And it is kind of fun. It's a learning experience. And
What Missy's not saying is technically she lives on a farm.
I do.
They
Yeah.
actually, so their oldest son was going to Utah State or
Yes, Utah State.
and they rented this place as an Airbnb just to meet up for Thanksgiving. When they were getting ready to retire from the Air Force, and they figured out that this place was for sale, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
I haven't been there personally, but the pictures are and so they bought it. It had a lot of self-constructed buildings.
Yes, that's the polite way to say it. Yes. Yeah, we had a 5-year plan, and there's a quirky things, we don't always, our water, we're getting ready to, we have a new cistern, which is a holding tank. It's an old well, but there are things we're improving. I always say our theme is it's better than it was.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And, the house is old and it was moved here in the 70s. It was built in 1908. And so, we are constantly trying to improve it. And
know that. So the house that's on your property was actually moved somewhere else?
Yeah, it was in downtown Logan on Main Street. The guy who moved it out here was an engineer, and he had this piece of property and he moved the house out here. And so originally on county records is it was built in the 1908, and then in the 70s he moved it out here. So, okay, enough about me. Is there a cause or an organization that you support, and how can we direct our listeners to them?
Yes. Well, I am very involved with an organization called Food for Neighbors that is based in Fairfax County. So we could direct people from Fairfax County or Arlington or Alexandria to the website, and you sign up. And the way it works, we work with area schools to keep food pantries specifically for students to have access to food during the day, or sometimes to take some food home if they need it. We have a very, very high need in our schools here, and even where our kids went, my kid is still at that school, and that middle school and other schools in the area, there's hunger is an issue. So, and we work in middle schools and high schools because elementary schools have a lot of resources actually for hunger. And once they and they have more active PTAs and just, there are more resources for younger kids. Once they get to middle school, it's not just, a lot of services just kind of drop, but the food as well. So, yeah. So anyway, I'm the pantry coordinator for 6 area schools here. And I think it's really important. Kids can't learn if they are hungry. And a lot of families desperately need the food as well. So some schools set it up as a pantry for families to come to. But then the other cause it's the same cause, but it's called World Central Kitchen. That is Jose Andres' nonprofit, and they go into emergency zones mostly and make food for for the aid workers and the people who work there. And I have seen it firsthand. They are on the spot. They're unbelievably organized, very dedicated. It's mostly chefs who will go, and, obviously they need people who know how to cook. And he is there, he's amazing. So to me, if Food for Neighbors is a very local, hyper local,
right.
And World Central Kitchen is sort of the more global. And I, haven't volunteered with them, but I would, and I do donate money to them. And you can too at World Central Kitchen. He also happens to have the best restaurants in our area, and he has many of them. So
yes, he does. Who
is that?
Jose Andrea? Trying to think of what his restaurants are.
He has his first restaurant. Well, actually, when I went to college in DC, and his first restaurant in the US, he's from Spain, but he came over here, I think, with $50 in his pocket. And his first restaurant was Paleo, and it's still there. And that was over 30 years ago, I think, or about 30 years ago that it opened. But yeah, he's got Zatenya. That's a really, that's my favorite. Oyamel is another one. Mini Bar, you might have heard of. But
Mhm.
he has like 8 of them or something like that in DC. So, and some in New York and all over the world now.
We now are in our second season, and when we ask people this, there seems to be a lot of organizations out there that are trying to help to deal with food insecurities. And unfortunately, it's a problem everywhere across this country. But I love the fact that they kind of concentrate on middle schoolers and high schoolers. Or I knew a lady who worked with homeless high schoolers in Calvert County. And you're like, homeless? What do you mean? And she's like, well, for one reason or another, they're homeless, whether they're with their families or not. And so she was just a resource to kind of help guide those kids to make sure that they finished high school and they had the resources they need. So I love the idea of pantries. I think that's a really good way for people to kind of get what they need without it being everybody knows, you're getting a backpack full of,
Exactly.
food at the end of the day. It's just it's discreet, and
Mhm.
I like that. Because I think a lot of our programs are focused on the younger kids, as they should be,
Right.
but we want to make sure everybody gets what they need. So I like that.
Exactly. And these kids, a lot of them with food insecurity, they may be going straight to work from school. I mean, they don't even
Right.
have,
Mhm.
and we work with social workers very closely.
Yeah.
They'll pinpoint, and school nurses also, because so
Oh
they can
yeah.
have snacks in their offices, because half the time, people come in there with a headache
Yeah.
and they're hungry. We did have some homeless kids actually in at our high school that we were giving obviously a lot of food to them. But
Yeah. Well, both of those are worthwhile causes, and I'm going to look them up. And
yeah,
obviously, if you're in the Fairfax area, look into Food
food
for
for neighbors.
Neighbors.
Food
I
for
like that.
neighbors. Yeah.
First guest of this season is a woman called Vanessa Gaddis, and she runs a program in Prince William County. So it's a sister county of Fairfax County.
Yeah.
They have these mobile, when I say food truck, not food truck in the, restaurant style, but they have these
Yeah.
trucks they call chow wagons, and very
Yeah.
similar concept,
Oh,
help
that's cool.
kids. Especially, I think it really took off during COVID because kids didn't have the resources from school to get the food. And then
Right.
and then also over the summers too.
Right. And what's great about that is she's actually taking it to the people, just taking it to the kids. Cause a lot of times families can't travel for for whatever reason.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of great organizations, and I love hearing about them, and I love that people support them. And so one last question, not that we have to stop talking, but is there, is there someone that you would recommend to us to interview?
There is definitely, and it's someone that Elizabeth knows very well. But she's fascinating and she's fun. And her name is Paige Totaro. And let's see, she and I were actually travel bloggers, family travel bloggers, 150 years ago when it was a new thing. And we did that for many years. We actually wrote a book together that is on Amazon about traveling to Brussels with kids. And we went to Brussels together for 2 weeks to research the book. So I've known her since our kids were in preschool together, and in middle school, she is, I mean, talk about wanderlust and the travel bug. So
Mhm.
she had always talked about, I want to travel for a year. I want to travel for a year with my family. And she did it. She did it when her twin girls were in seventh grade, seventh or eighth,
Seventh
seventh, I
grade,
think.
I think. Yep.
And they took the year, they went all over the world. And a few years ago, she bought a house on the Rappahannock River.
Hmm.
That's 100-year-old house in this town of, what, 50 maybe?
Yeah.
And she just moved from, Northern Virginia, most congested place on earth, to this just completely quiet on the river lifestyle with this very old house that she's been fixing up. So and she's still traveling all
She's
the time.
she's running tours to places. She took a group of people to Mongolia for the Golden Eagle Festival. And I think she's getting ready to take people on a yoga retreat in Greece, if I remember correctly.
Yes, second one. She's already done that one once. So yeah, she is just nonstop. So she also is executive director of art gallery in a little nearby town. So
she's not one to be a wallflower, and I mean that in the best possible way. So like she's joined the local gardening group.
oh yeah. Yeah.
Her
She
little
loves gardening.
has about 10 houses on it, and they all know each other and look out for each other. And then the local art gallery gig, that's a new job that she's been appointed to. So exactly. And
maybe she can give me some pointers about my house.
yeah, well,
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Vero and I are very lucky because she's an incredible hostess and has had our writing group to her house multiple times, which has just been lovely.
It has.
Fun.
I wanted to slightly circle back, but also shout out, what is the name of the website where your plays are posted if people want to produce your plays?
Oh gosh. It is called New Play Exchange. And yes, you can find me on there, an outdated profile with some outdated production history. So no, by the time you hear this, it will be up to date.
You have a few weeks before we get this episode edited and blast that all over.
Exactly.
And have, our hundreds of listeners.
Yes.
You got a couple weeks to get that updated. Taking up a lot of your time.
Oh, this was fun.
And we appreciate, just because we have a first season doesn't mean it's any less nerve-wracking for our guests. So we do appreciate your faith in us to be our guests.
Wow.
No, this was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so very, very much, Vero. And thanks for nominating Paige. I mean, we're trying to let this all unfold organically, but of course, it's always wonderful when somebody that I know that is just so fun and super cool. It'll be great to introduce her to Missy. So, Missy, what did you think of meeting Vero today?
Well, she's very interesting. And I don't think I've ever met anybody who's a playwright. So it was interesting. And being someone who would love to be published author, I guess I just never really thought of playwrights. And so it was just kind of interesting and neat to hear about her process and learn about playwriting.
Well, and how interesting that you two who have never met before have a connection with the country of Belgium.
Right. Yes. Always love talking to people who, she is Belgian, born there, and has lived there. And I think that's with any country. Like she said, just meeting the locals and connecting with them. And because they also gain something from that relationship as far as just connections. And our neighbors were like, wow, we never realized what the base did, which was really sad. They didn't understand what we were doing there, like what our mission was. And so we were able to educate them on that, but they were so neighborly. And if we had trouble, if we had issues, they were always welcoming to help and would watch our place when we went on vacation. So yeah,
that's the hidden gem of living overseas is that, especially in the military, you can just stay on the base and amongst Americans and really have zero interaction with the local nationals. But really, the best part of living overseas is having an opportunity to experience the country and to meet people and
So anything that stood out for you? I mean, I'm sure you probably even learned something about Vero. I know she's your friend, but did you learn anything new?
I did. I guess I hadn't heard from her that it was a conscious decision to stay in one location as her sons were growing up and to explore the world for sure, but give them the stability of living in one location. I didn't realize that was a conscious decision. I thought that was really cool because I feel like I had the same experience. I grew up in a military family that moved around tons, but then my own kids, we really didn't move once they were in kindergarten, which is 1 in a million, super unusual for the military, but that's just how it worked out. So they got a similar experience where they had a home base, but we did go out and kind of see the world.
And there are ways to give them best of both worlds. And Chris and I never living anywhere else, I mean, except for when we went to college, and then having that experience to live in Europe, not once, but twice, and then he lived in Asia, we thought we were showing our kids the world. And there are great benefits from that, living in different places. And kind of on this side of things, and now talking to our adult kids, realizing that sometimes that it was very hard with them. And for every good thing about seeing the world and going to different places, there were definitely some downsides.
There is no perfect answer, really.
No.
I had no idea that Vero's playwriting started about when our writing group started meeting.
Really?
I guess to have the confidence, and I mean this in the best possible way, but to have the confidence to have her play entered at a local theater for a reading and to enter her plays even now in some of these really big festivals is just is really amazing. I mean, I think they're fantastic, but I'm certainly not a expert on playwriting, but I'm excited for her and in awe of her jumping in with both feet.
Yeah. And I really feel like playwriting, that would, to me, would seem like a very hard, well, maybe a genre to get into. It's one thing for people to read your work, but then like to put it on stage and act it out is just, I would be very intimidated by that. And it was very interesting that she said directors can take liberties as far as, this scene's going to take place in a restaurant or space, but they can't change the dialogue. I thought that was very interesting.
Because I don't think movie scripts work the same way, but interesting that play scripts are that way. So
right. She's a very interesting person. I did appreciate her explaining us the difference between Broadway, off-Broadway, off-Broadway. Has nothing to do about if they're on Broadway or the next street over.
Number of seats. I know. Interesting.
I know. I also love that we asked the question about causes, and we learned about so many things that are national, but also local to some of our listeners.
Yep. They have, Vero didn't talk about it, but they have, I think once a quarter, they have food drives where they collect food.
Nice.
And then they source these different closets or pantries.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know that we don't have one at Cohen School, but one of the high schools in our school system has a pantry. And like once a year, we do a food drive for them or give them money so that they can get necessities. And I think that food pantry at that school is actually open to any high schoolers in the Valley. So if you can get there, you can go in. And so the ones that she talked about were food for neighbors in Fairfax County.
Yep.
For school kids, especially middle and high school, and they have pantries. And then she also mentioned World Central Kitchens that go to emergencies, maybe disaster areas, and make food for the aid workers, emergency workers.
Yep.
Volunteers. But I love people who kind of think outside the box.
Find us at facebook.com/YSMMF podcast and Instagram at YSMMF podcast for episode announcements. Thanks.
Do I say, hi, I'm Missy, or this is Missy? What do we usually do?
I think we say, hi, I'm Missy. Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Missy.
And I'm Elizabeth. And what is the name of our podcast?